Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dawn of Drones podcast. We are in our inaugural month here and we are talking about high impact use cases. Last week we had with us Luke Fox of White Fox Defense, and he talked about some of the enabling technologies that they bring to the table to help the kind of use cases we're going to hear about today and for the rest of the month. So today we have with us, we are very honored to have with us two amazing folks. Number one, we've got Todd Spain from the Advanced Mobility Collective, and we've got Ben Miller from Colorado's Center of Excellence for Advanced Technology Aerial Firefighting. And we're going to talk all about what advanced technology in the form of drones, advanced air mobility, and other technology can bring literally to the fight against fires. So without further ado, by the way, this is live, so jump in the chat, say hello, tell us where you're coming from, ask your questions there, and give us some positive encouragement. We absolutely love that. So Todd, first of all, welcome to both of you, and so great to have you both on here. Todd, thank you also for having the Advanced Mobility Collective sponsor this particular episode. Why don't you tell the viewers a little bit about your personal background?
Yeah, happy to do that. And to the viewers, I'm actually on holiday in Alaska, so hence the dark sky. It's not quite, it's still early in the morning yet, and we're pretty casual here. But I've enjoyed a really fun life. I spent my entire life trying to figure out how to make technology do real things for people to change the human condition. And doing that through building software, I worked for Cisco Systems for quite some time and held quite a few different leadership roles there, executive roles there. And for the past 10 years or so, I've actually worked on helping growth stage companies figure out how the heck to get past their challenges. And for the last 2 years, I've been the Mobility Collective, which I'm so thrilled about, and especially thrilled to be partnering with Ben Miller to try and figure out, among other things, how to help solve wildfire challenges.
And Truth in Lending, I'm also an advisor to the collective, and I'm really honored to do that. I've been working with Todd the past several months, lots of new members, lots of new companies joining up, and we're going to talk a lot about that here in a minute. But before we do, let's move over to Ben. And before Ben says anything about himself, I want to say something about Ben. So Ben has been in the drone world for a long time. In fact, you may have heard his name if you were in this space around the 2012, 2013 timeframe. If you heard about that Mesa County, Colorado sheriff that started that first drone public safety program in the entire country, that was Ben. Obviously, he was doing stuff before that with drones, but that's when I remember coming across his name when I was doing my own research. I was part of the Air Force, and I remember thinking to myself, I want to meet that guy when I go to Colorado. And now finally, I've met Ben virtually a couple times. I can't wait to meet him in person. But Ben, without further ado, please give us a little bit about your background.
Oh, wow, thanks. Yeah, so I began my public safety career in the year 2000, and probably by about 2007, 2008, with kind of I guess on the hobby side, I was playing with tech, playing with web-enabled devices and some other things, and I always had this, interest in what's the next generation of tools in the public safety space. At the time, that was with the Mesa County Sheriff's Office, so it was kind of this law enforcement, what works for the a Colorado sheriff's deputy. And around 2008, 2009, the word drone popped into my office one afternoon. A friend, after a search and rescue mission. And he said, wouldn't it be great if we had a Predator drone on that thing we just did? And we had just went out and looked for a lost kid in the Grand Mesa National Forest. And as I always said, I was a pragmatic technologist, and I said, no, that's not crazy. That's kind of crazy. I don't think that's realistic, whatever. But I'll never forget, about an hour later, sitting in my office, kind of recouping, I thought, I wonder. And that's really the beginning of the story. So I have to give credit where credit's due. I had a sheriff at the time that wasn't afraid of that idea and gave us the space to investigate it further. And then myself and my teammates were just really persistent at the time. We had this thing called fear no hoop, because we felt like initially the FAA just would toss up a hoop thinking that maybe we'd go away and we'd hop through that one, and then they'd toss up another one, we'd hop through that one, and we just kept going. And the sheriff at the time said, walk in the front door. And so we did, and eventually it led to an operational program. And I think that opportunity and persistence really paid off, and we did some good things for the folks in Mesa County with unmanned systems. They're all old. They all literally sit in museums now, collecting dust, and the technology and tool is onto a whole new generation of stuff. But yeah, it's a great story. It's led to what I do now, and now I lead the research and development group for the state fire department in Colorado.
Yeah, that's a great segue. You know, I remember those days, and that's when I came across your name, Ben, in the 2012-2013 timeframe, because I was with the Air Force, and we actually used a Reaper, or well, I'm not sure if it was a Reaper or Predator, but it was the asset that was attached to the California National Guard. And if you recall, at the time, there was the California Rim wildfire. And it was really out of control. I mean, we're seeing the world on fire right now, right? So this is unfortunately nothing new. But at the time, you know, this idea of how can we put a Reaper or Pred above a fire to help the local authorities, and for the military, that's a big deal, right? We can talk about defense support of civil authorities some other time, but you know, that required Secretary of Defense approval. We did it. It was amazing. It changed the battle rhythm, and that's real of fighting that fire. And I think that's a great segue to talk about how now, Ben, you're involved in the firefighting aspect of this. Tell us about the Colorado Center of Excellence, what it is and what you do there.
Yeah, so it's a long name, the Colorado Center of Excellence for Advanced Technology Aerial Firefighting. We always kind of joke, you can thank the state legislature of Colorado for the name. It's what was included in the language in the bill that created us. But really, in 2014, the state of Colorado wanted to invest further into the wildland fire effort from a state resource perspective. You know, predominantly from there, it kind of went from your local fire chiefs and sheriffs, and then took a big jump to your federal partners. And somewhere within that jump, there were some lessons learned. And so the state of Colorado said, we want to fill that gap. We want to be more proactive in our ability to respond to fire events in the state, somewhere between that county sheriff with their responsibility for fire, and then all the way up to those federal property managers, you know, in the Department of the Interior and the U.S. Forest Service. And so they made this investment, they put some money towards it, and it was identified early on that early detection was very valuable and a pragmatic place to put our dollars. And so along with that, along with the investment in aviation resources, and by aviation resources, I mean, we purchased 2 Pilatus PC-12s. At the time, that was, I guess, easier done than unmanned systems operations. Ironically, though, it's literally the same camera on board both those aircraft. So it's basically a Predator drone or Reaper operation in capability. Obviously not, you know, persistence, but we launched those from Centennial, Colorado. They go out and they look for fires when they first start. The creation of the Center of Excellence was about, if we're making that investment, let's stand up a group that is consistently looking at the next thing in fire technology and aviation. And so that's where we came from. That's where really our namesake is. Bottom line, though, that's kind of a long-winded story to say, we are the research and development section of the state fire department. So we have sections in training, in operations, in fire certification of buildings and structures. And then the section that I run is a group of technologists that are and wildland fire operators that are looking at kind of the what's next, at making sure that our organization and the investment of the state is at the state of the art.
So let's pause the discussion on the planes you put up there now, because I want to transition back to Todd and talk about what the Advanced Mobility Collective is doing in this space.
Yeah, so the Advanced Mobility Collective is we've been around for about 2 years. It's a not-for-profit. It really is a techno-social organization, and it's a term I think we invented, but it's about using technology for social good. And we have two main focus areas right now. One is in healthcare logistics, so figuring out how to use these new advanced mobility technologies to better serve healthcare organizations and healthcare use cases by leveraging advanced mobility for logistics management. And the other area is disaster management and resiliency. What that means on the East Coast is that we're working with departments of transportation and FEMA and the Red Cross and others to build operations, ongoing operations that can use drones and VTOLs and bots and robotics and that sort of thing, IoT sensors and so on, to better serve disaster management use cases there. But in Colorado, where I live, work very, very closely with Ben, and we're working very hard and very close to standing up something we call a Forest Tech Center. And the idea with the Forest Tech Center is to assemble these very complex system of systems solutions that could be drones, it could be robotics, it could be IoT sensors and weather sensors and high altitude platforms and communications infrastructure, and assemble them in such a way that we can prove their technology works together as a system of systems, and then expand the capability of that system, and then expand the geography of where those systems are deployed. So with the center being in Colorado, there are about 12 counties that are at severe risk for wildfire right now, and we want to get these technologies deployed to all 12. And then there's no limit there to the borders. We want to bring that to California and help out, and Oregon and Alaska and so on. And so my partnership with Ben is really important there, because Ben stands on the mountain with me and looks at the operators, people that are actually trying to go do this. And my job is to look the other way and face industry and figure out what they need and assemble it in a way that we can create solutions together that Ben can deploy.
Yeah, well, that is maybe a great segue also to talking. You mentioned some other states, and I had mentioned the world is on fire. I just saw an article where Greece is asking for help, I believe, with some of the wildfires happening there.
And Turkey.
Yeah, and Turkey. I mean, this is really, I feel, almost unprecedented what we're seeing across the globe. But let's talk a little bit about the scope of this problem. I mean, Ben, we had a great discussion in Clubhouse last Thursday where you talked about how wildland firefighting isn't just limited to the forest anymore. There's so much urban sprawl and creep that now it's really encroaching on, neighborhoods and not just folks that live in the woods. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing out there as a trend vis-a-vis kind of the fires, especially in the wild?
Yeah, I think the best way to explain it is that, prior to about 5 or 6 years ago, and some of the big devastating fires in Southern California and in Colorado, and really the Western region, we really thought of wildland fire, forest fire, as a forest managed event. And we kind of left it to our forest managers. And in a lot of cases, even in California and Colorado and Oregon and places like that, still there are times where forest fire is a fire management tool. But as you said, with urban sprawl, with people wanting to live in beautiful places, that now becomes a public safety event. When it threatens lives and property, it's not really a forest management. I think sometimes there was a period of time where those events were occurring and forest management agencies were just ill-equipped and ill-trained to handle that reality. And so now you're seeing states invest in their public safety capability within the wildland fire problem. And it's only getting worse. I mean, considered as a threat, the threat is only increasing. We're chasing. We didn't see it coming and get out in front of it and stop it from happening. It's something that we've realized, and we're trying to catch back up with. And so it's here to stay. This isn't a thing where, over the course of the next 2 years, states like ours will make an investment in state resource, state owned rapid initial, detection, rapid initial attack, and we'll kind of back off. I think it's here to stay. I think if you're going to provide for, wonderful experience in your state, I think that's just something that's going to have to happen for the foreseeable future.
Well, let's
Yeah,
talk. Go ahead, please, Todd.
I was going to say, if I may, some of what's happening is obviously the environment is different. And in Colorado, for example, it's the same as California. It's drier, it's warmer, and our fire season now is from about a week after the snow melts in May and until the snow falls again in November, and that's very different. It used to be August, September kind of event, and so we planned around that. And now it's much more difficult because the season is just going on longer and longer and longer. And it's been said the using these technologies for mitigation, so figuring out how to better manage what been often calls the WUI, the wildland urban interface, where the urban reaches the forest, and that's the place where these now people and assets are at risk. We've got to figure out how to mitigate those areas, put the fuels away, better build homes, but also figure out where the fires are early and put them out before they become devastating events.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's talk a little bit about the network technology that you mentioned, Todd, because you said you're putting together companies that have different technologies. And I know just Rogo Communications out of I think they're out of Denver is one example, or Boulder, I don't remember honestly. But so many companies are jumping into this space. So what are you seeing and who are you working with right now?
Yeah, it's extraordinary the number of companies that are interested in this. And I'll give you an example. SAS, which is a big data analytics company, is very interested in working with California and using their analytics products to be able to figure out where to mitigate and what might happen. There's a company in the collective that's called QS-2, and they're phenomenal at understanding weather, especially microclimates and very small regions, and understanding what's happening in the weather, and in order to be able to predict where wildfires might happen, but also know what might happen on the ground in real time, and what wind shifts might happen in very small areas is really critical now to being able to fight this. So weather is a big part of it, putting sensors in place, putting communication infrastructure in place, putting the analytics in place to really understand this and be predictive about what's going to happen and what is happening, and doing that real time and fast, leveraging edge computing, for example, making every asset, a firefighter, a fire truck, and a drone, and a VTOL, a weather station, if you will, that's collecting data and mining data very rapidly. So weather's the big part of it. And then being able to take all that information of where assets are, where a human is, where the fire is, what's happening with the weather, what's happening with where we're moving the command station, for example, where fires might be merging, and bringing all that data to a single pane of glass that can be viewed on a canvas on the side of a hill somewhere, and have the communications infrastructure in place to make that all work. That's really a big part of what we're talking about. And then leveraging the drones to be able to have eyes in the sky and put fires out. That's just it's kind of a bonus on top. But the critical part to be able to make this all work in harmony is to have that infrastructure, that core infrastructure in place. And one of the things that Ben and I are really hammering home in Colorado, for example, is put permanent infrastructure in place that you don't have to move around, that stays there and that gives us eyes on in the air and on the ground all the time, literally nonstop.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ben, this is probably a good time to jump back a little bit about what you said earlier, that right now you're putting up a manned aircraft, right, over an area to find hotspots, for that prevention angle, and things like that. So how do you see the technology that Todd is talking about? How do you see that radically changing your current operations?
Well, yeah, that fantastic question and perfect segue from what Todd was sharing with us. Every project that we work on at the Center of Excellence probably has a network and connectivity component to it. And a lot of what we're working on is this new concept of not just situational awareness, which is kind of the understanding of the situation as a whole, but it's really adding that spatial component. We're beginning to call it spatial awareness. It's still SA. We're just switching, situation and spatial, but it's about knowing the where of the what. We do a fantastic job of communicating what over our voice communication networks. We've spent a lot of money over the last few decades establishing those, converting from analog radios to digital radios, and from kind of more smart managed networks now where we communicate voice wise. But literally, we'll fly in a $40,000 load of retardant burning jet fuel, and the way we put it on target is, hey, tanker 20, do you see that pond and the rock down there? And then we hope that they indeed see the same pond that the air attack folks are looking at. So we think we can connect the wildland fire space in better ways, from a safety perspective, from an efficiency perspective, and all of that falls back to connectivity. That's a big challenge. We have, in the state of Colorado, invested in early detection and rapid initial attack. And that early detection piece is our MMA program, our multi-mission aircraft. And that's the two Pilatus PC-12s with the pilot and staff in the back, running an infrared sensor across the ground from 20,000 feet. They're looking for those hot spots. They chase lightning storms, they chase fire reports, etc. And when they see something, they have the ability to know exactly where, from a lat long, a GPS perspective, where they're looking. And so the next big piece is communicating that critical information out to those resources that can then conduct that rapid initial attack phase of the mission. And that's getting really, quite literally, water and dirt on the hot stuff. And the faster we can do that, the better chance we have of that single tree fire, that tree that just got struck by lightning, remaining just that single or two tree fire, and not a 20 acre and a 200 acre and then a 200,000 acre event that has long lasting, impacts through the years. So that's the nature of the beast, and network connectivity is as critical as water.
And, drones will be a big part of this. We talked about, the Reaper and Preds, back in 2013 that I was involved with. Drones are good. And then, the operators that fly them can actually cause problems during these operations. Because we've been talking about prevention. We've been talking a little bit about, the actual operations and what technology brings to the fight. The truth of the matter is that sometimes technology can interfere. In fact, before we got on this presentation together, we were talking a little bit about how Luke Fox from White Fox Defense had just mentioned on LinkedIn that it took over 5 hours for crews to find a downed PG&E power line that could have been found in just a fraction of that time with a drone. And the reason why, and it started a fire, by the way, the reason why is because there was a rogue drone that appeared in the area. And, there's laws now in the books about this. The 2018, I believe it's the 2018 FAA Reauthorization Act actually makes this a federal crime, interfering with these kinds of operations. Ironically and sadly, in that case, I guess it was an actual PGE employee who was flying that drone errantly. But just 1 second here on White Fox Defense. Wanted to throw a quick shout out and thank you to them again for generously sponsoring this high impact use case month. White Fox, the reason why they sponsored this month is because their technology, and Todd just talked about this infrastructure that's needed across the country. They actually have infrastructure across the country to help detect drones in a space, and they have this really cool Stratus cloud-based system where in real time you can track these drones and decide, okay, is this a white hat, a black hat drone? Like, is this one we need to be concerned about? And then you can actually find the operator too. So thanks again to White Fox for sponsoring this month. And let's get to what happens after the event, right? So after the fire, there's so much that needs to be done. And Ben, you said something in Clubhouse last week that was the first time I ever heard something like this. Maybe someday we could have advanced air mobility, or eVTOL, electric vertical takeoff landing aircraft, a fleet of these dropping, like reseeding forests. Tell us about your vision, because I never honestly thought about that, but it was just such an interesting thing you said about, really, I'll call it reparations or mitigation after the wildfire event?
Yeah, well, in all fairness, I think that was Todd's comment in
Oh, was it?
Clubhouse,
Okay,
but
sorry,
he
Todd.
took the words right out of my mouth. I think the biggest thing, and I've said this over the years as kind of a, the work I've done in unmanned systems. It was apparent to me and my team early on that there were two major plays in unmanned systems, and I'll tie this into reseeding. Number one is mobility. I mean, that's what aviation provides, right? We loose the bounds of the earth and we can travel in a straight line quickly from point A to point B. Drones give us that. Urban air mobility gives us that. But the other big thing about drones is that democratization factor, that the basic economics of aviation are significantly different in an unmanned system, in a battery powered, sometimes disposable aircraft. And so anytime we have to create mobility around a thing, and in this case, the thing is the seeds that were burnt up on the side of the hill that no longer exist, we have to put those back. And so the drone is this democratized way of getting those seeds back to that hillside, more efficient, safer, cheaper, et cetera. It's just, in a lot of cases, a better way to do business. And we're excited to see that. There are now drone seeding operations occurring in the state of Colorado and across the country. And again, it's that mobility play. And that's a big, big thing, not just in public safety, but in life as we know it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big part of what you do, Todd, in the collective, right? You focus also on that back end of recovery and resilience. So tell us about, and I apologize for not, crediting you for that comment on Clubhouse last week, but what else are you kind of thinking as the future of mobility when it comes to disaster management, wildfires?
Yeah, I want to finish this one out real quick because it's very personal for me. So this East Troublesome fire in Colorado last year blew up to 200,000 acres with 170-mile-an-hour winds and tornadoes in its own weather, spewing fireballs over the Continental Divide towards Estes Park. And it was a catastrophic event, obviously. And that fire came within 1/2 mile of our house in Colorado, and it scared the hell out of me.
Oh my gosh.
And we thought our house was gone. So it's very personal. And this summer, we have seen a pair of helicopters that are very expensive. They're picking up giant bags of seed and mulch, I think it is, and carrying that out to places in the forest and dropping those off in their reseeding effort. And I can't imagine a more expensive way to do it than that, other than maybe having humans going out there.
Yeah.
But what adding to what Ben says is mobility also adds the ability to have fleets, a fleet mentality, whereby we could send 50 VTOLs to do that. And there's another thing that comes with it, which is precision. So instead of saying, go to that rock there by the pond, it is an exact lat long drop, or it is a laser that's pointing to some place. And we know where to go because we've had drones and other detectors that have told us where the soil is damaged the most, where the burn scar is worse, where the burn scar was the hottest, where the vegetation isn't returning. And so we're using these technologies to figure out where the most damage is and where recovery needs to take place first, and where there's the biggest issues with watershed and flooding taking place. And then we can use these VTOLs in a fleet and a massive mobility model to be able to very precisely drop what we're looking for to go to the place where it needs to go the most. And I think that's what's the most exciting for me, is the precision. Ben mentioned mobility, but it's also this notion of being able to deploy lots and lots of things. And we started touching on the subject that the ability to deconflict airspace is a critical part of that. But I want all of our listeners, especially the companies that are involved in this, to understand it's not just airspace deconfliction needs to happen. It's three-dimensional. We have to know where everything is on the ground and in the air at all times. And they need to be brought together in such a way that operators can see that with a high degree of precision. You can't drop seed on a human being. And if we only know where airspace is, we could wind up, dropping it on a hunter out there. So we need to know, and we have to have an absolute three-dimensional multimodal view, in this case of the battlefield, if you will. So I think what's coming is that.
No, these are, I mean, this is exactly why we have you on here. This is talk about high impact use cases. I mean, the wave of the future is what we're talking about. We can start it now small and grow it as those approvals get started. I mean, I think, Ben, you started off talking about search and rescue. And, you know, for many law enforcement agencies across the country right now, beyond visual line of sight, we have the tactical BV loss approvals, you know, that drone responders was very helpful with Chula Vista and a couple other departments in obtaining. But true beyond visual line of sight is not yet the thing. So, you know, fingers crossed, the BV loss ARC will come out with some great recommendations, and we'll see some rulemaking early next year, and we can move out on this stuff. But wow, absolutely incredible, the things that you are both talking about. So Todd, what is on the horizon for the collective? So you mentioned the Forest Tech Center here in Colorado. And, you know, obviously you're doing some stuff in healthcare as well. By the way, everybody, check out the website for the collective. You'll find a lot of information on there. Same with Ben's website at the Center of Excellence in Colorado for advanced technology aerial firefighting. Lots of great information for the public safety community and for the public writ large. So Todd, what's next for you guys?
Yeah, it really is standing up physical and virtual places whereby one to N companies or two to N companies can link together their technology and focus through the lens of use cases that really make sense. So for example, reseeding or early detection. And our job at the collective is to find the potential partners that can be brought together to actually link arms and solve these real challenges in both a virtual way and a physical way. So the physical presence is going to look something like acreage in probably in Grand County, Colorado, and eventually to many other places in Colorado and California and so on. We're working very diligently to get one stood up in California as well. And our goal there is to build a permanent, I don't like the word testing, a permanent assembly area whereby the partners can figure out how to link their technologies together to solve, then allow anybody else, any other kind of partner that wants to test with what they're doing to plug into it and figure out how what their technology is doing makes sense. And then from there, our intention is to spread that to real deployments across a county wide. Perhaps that's in Grand County, Colorado, perhaps that's in some other county, and the same thing in California. And then along the way, just always continue to strive to add capabilities to that core initial deployment. That's where we're after. So the collective at AMC.org is very, very focused, and I use this with love to the rest of the industry. We are in no way interested in science experiments. We are highly focused on creating economically sustainable operations for the partners in the collective. And one of the problems that we have in this space right now, where thousands of companies, there's going to be thousands of companies at AUVSI next week, and probably 98.2% of them can't see a path to revenue anytime in the next 3 years. And what I would really like to see is the companies that are here that are advancing technology very rapidly have places to deploy that technology where they can actually get paid and have an ongoing revenue stream. And to do that, you have to solve real world problems. And so Ben and I together and a lot of others in the collective, we're very focused on real world problems and creating economic sustainability that does good for the world.
Well, and that makes a lot of sense. And your technology is great when it works. I just want to acknowledge we're having some weird like glitches. So I appreciate everybody bearing with us as you see my eyes continuing to blink or my body moving repeatedly. I'm not really sure what's happening right now, but it's all good. I think the audio will be fine. And Ben, when we talked on Clubhouse last week, you mentioned you guys do a lot of training and maybe going into the next phase of that training for firefighting and public safety community. Tell us a little bit about what's next on the horizon at the Center of Excellence, besides what Todd had mentioned vis-a-vis your own partnership.
Yeah, I guess from a training perspective, both in what we're doing with our kind of our spatial awareness apps on phones, mobile devices, et cetera, we're kind of getting into that. How do we roll this out to what we call our stakeholders, our fire agencies in the state of Colorado at the local level, at the fire districts and sheriff's office level. But then our big push right now in the process the program we've stood up over the last few years and has really become quite successful is our UAS pilot certification process. And so it began with a need within the Colorado Department of Public Safety, where we live, to certify internally our UAS operators. And across CDPS, we probably have more than 150 drone pilots, if you will. And our process takes them beyond just the Part 107, hey, I answered 60% of all the questions on the 107 test correctly kind of thing. It gives them practical knowledge, things like, hey, this is what you do to store your batteries safely, and how if they do this, this is why it happened, and how not to do that twice. And then it takes them into, can you actually position your unmanned system in space successfully? And so we've partnered with NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, Adam Jacoff and his project there. I've worked with Adam for years and years, kind of developing what's a low-cost, practical solution to test the skills, the actual operational skills of an unmanned system operator. And so we have a program by which CDPS personnel and public safety agencies across the state of Colorado can come see us for a day, basically. And in the morning, we give you kind of that education piece, that training piece beyond Part 107. And then in the afternoon, we run you through in an indoor flight facility so that the environment's consistent upon all participants, across all participants. And we basically have about 30 some odd positions that you have to put the drone in under 12 minutes. If done successfully, you pass, and we provide you a credential card that you carry. And the hope of the credential card is kind of twofold. If I'm an incident manager on an incident, regardless of type in public safety, from law enforcement to fire, search and rescue, etc., I have a person that shows up on scene and says, hey, I have a drone, I want to help. I have no way of assessing, is that person qualified to do this? Are they an addition, a positive move in the event, or is this a kind of a negative liability? And so they show that card, and at least I know, hey, they've been through the process with the Colorado Department of Public Safety. The other piece we have is that on successful completion, they end up in our database. And when an event happens in a certain area, we can look in the database and say, hey, who in that area has a UAS resource, and we can contact those folks kind of the other direction and say, hey, there's a need here, and give this local sheriff, this local fire chief, this local police chief a call, and they've got an event you could probably help with.
Well, that's a great maybe jump into. I just wanted to acknowledge one of our fans out there, Eddie Hughes, mentioned in the chat here. He's a private pilot, just got his Part 107, looking to earn some money with drones. And so my question to you, Ben, is this training program you're talking about, all the things that are happening in public safety and in firefighting, can a private pilot with just a Part 107 license somehow tap into that? I know there are like private organizations that will kind of contract out with private drone pilots. How does someone like Eddie tap into that system?
Well, I would say at this point in time, the most immediate way and kind of the accepted way now at this point is association with a public safety organization. That would be a volunteer on a search and rescue team, and obviously a paid employee on a law enforcement agency or a fire agency. I don't think the culture of public safety management is really quite at the point yet without official association with some sort of recognized body. And it's not necessarily paid career folks. It can be volunteers. We have volunteer firefighters, volunteer search and rescue personnel. Some law enforcement organizations have literally volunteer deputies that may be, still post-certified, retired police officers, et cetera. But there's a kind of a official capacity. This is the group that I'm with that, has a certain standard and lends credibility to inclusion within the incident.
Yeah. I was just out with the Civil Air Patrol a couple of weeks ago. I got a flight. They let me fly the plane, which is really frightening, but I did it. And, I asked them like, hey, do you guys have a drone fleet? And they said no. And, when you think about this volunteer force and what drones can bring to the fight, and how many 107 pilots out there would probably willing to join the Civil Air Patrol to help in all kinds of missions, I just think there's so much more that can be done. So we're getting very close to the close of our time here together. And I wanted to give you each just a couple minutes to wrap up and really tell the audience whatever else you have on your mind when it comes to disaster management, wildland firefighting, and how advanced technology is really going to change the world. So let's start with you, Ben, and then we'll end with Todd.
Boy, how advanced technology is going to change the world. That's incredible. Big picture connectivity in the real-time exchange of information. And now, like I said before, that spatial component, the where instead of just the what. Like I said, we do a great job chatting over the radio. I'm always impressed with public safety communicators to be effective and efficient in the way they communicate verbally, but still we fall short. And so we're excited to see advanced technology connect us in a way that we then can share larger packets, if you will, of data, maps and positions and stuff like that. So we're excited. We just tested within our work with the Team Awareness Kit, TAC, and we call it ATAC on the Android platform. I can take my phone, point it in a direction, and now my phone becomes an observation point within TAC. Everybody on my network I broadcast the video to not only sees the video from my phone, from the camera on my phone, but literally sees graphically where I'm standing and where my phone is pointed. So if I'm looking for a bad guy on the law enforcement side or looking for smoke on the fire side, I can show that this is smoke to my team, and they know exactly in real time where I'm looking and where that's located.
Well, this is going to save lives in many respects, right? Because I know we talked before where, you can literally tell people like, okay, you need to go in the other direction because you're literally headed into the fire. So that's just absolutely incredible. And it just reminiscent of, it's almost like a Blue Force tracker, that the military has like on steroids, right? So thanks so much, Ben, for everything you are doing and for enlightening us on what the Center of Excellence here in Colorado is doing. I encourage folks to come on out to Colorado and meet us at some point and check out what we're doing in person. Todd, how about you? Well, let's wrap up with you and your deep thoughts to close us out.
Wow, I think it's sort of the same thing Ben is saying, but I think the answer for me is convergence. It's the convergence of high-speed communications and IoT sensors with these new vehicle capabilities, and I think that the combination of those things, when brought together wisely and diligently, is going to wind up making a very big difference. And I've used the term trying to figure out how to manage nature at scale. And I think that's really what these emerging and merged technologies are going to be able to give us some capability to be able to better manage nature at scale. So I think that's where we're after.
What was the other word you made up earlier that I loved? It was techno-societal.
Techno-social.
Techno-social, right? Techno-social solutions.
And,
I love that.
And your other new word was you just made this one up too? Something at scale. It was
Yeah.
Good stuff. I mean, no, this is great. And thank you both again for joining us. Once again, what I'm seeing on my screen is a little bit crazy town. But this has been a ton of fun. I again learned more. I mean, we talked last week on Clubhouse, and this was even more information, just spectacular. For those that are going to keep dialing in, by the way, tomorrow on Clubhouse, we're going to have next week's podcast guest. Tony Drummond is the CEO of woman-owned Global Aerial Management Group. When you talk about high impact use cases, they're doing drone disinfecting operations that are reopening America. So it should be really exciting. Interesting legal authorities she had to get to be able to do these kind of things. And she's got an interesting tie-in with her aviation, her manned aviation business as well. So join us tomorrow in Clubhouse, 11 a.m. Mountain, 1 p.m. Eastern, Drone Law Connections Room. And then this same time, same place next week with Tony here on the Dawn of Drones podcast at 9 a.m. Mountain, 11 a.m. Eastern. And so I think that's a wrap. Thank you so much, gentlemen. It was absolutely a pleasure to have you both on. And thank you again, Todd and the Advanced Mobility Collective for sponsoring this particular episode. Everybody check out their website and we hope to see you again soon. Right here.